At 41, Pippa Middleton has broken her silence in an emotional moment that left many stunned. Known for her grace and public composure, she finally opened up and admitted the real reason behind her quiet divorce from husband James Matthews. For years, the couple appeared picture perfect, but behind closed doors, things weren't as they seemed. Now, with tears in her eyes, Pippa is revealing what really went wrong and why she kept it hidden for so long. What caused this final break, and why is she speaking out now? Join us as we uncover the full story. Pippa Middleton's public life showed what looked like perfection for years because she had the fairy tale wedding and what seemed like a peaceful mix of quiet luxury, a lovely husband, and a growing family. But under those polished looks, small changes started showing, and even though no official announcement has been made, people began to notice the signs, like a growing distance between the couple and fewer times they were seen together, and also long silences that took the place of how often they used to show up before. This quiet disconnection had been growing for a while, and it pointed to deeper problems that were very different from the perfect picture people were used to seeing. And now, with Pippa having emotionally admitted what went wrong, it's become undeniably clear that something significant has changed between her and James. She's no longer keeping her pain hidden, instead, she's openly addressing the deep hurt this situation has caused her. But what really is the cause of this pain she's talking about? Keep watching to find out. To really understand why these changes happened and why Pippa is now opening up about her truth, we need to go back to where their story first began, because things weren't always as perfect as they looked on the screen. Before the gowns and castles, before the cameras followed her every move, before she became known as the world's most famous bridesmaid, and before her marriage, Pippa was just a girl from Bucklebury. She grew up in a quiet English village, the second of 3 children. Her parents, Carol and Michael Middleton, ran a party supplies business. They weren't royal, but they worked hard and raised their kids to value manners, tradition, and family. Pippa's early life was simple. She went to good schools and joined in school plays and sports. She was known for being smart, active, and always polite. People liked her. But everything changed when her older sister Kate started dating Prince William. Suddenly, the Middleton family wasn't just another hard-working British household, they were in the spotlight. And Pippa, whether she wanted it or not, was pulled into that world too. Things really took off after Kate and William's wedding in 2011. Pippa, as the maid of honor, wore a sleek white dress and carried Kate's train down the aisle. In just one day, she became a global name. The press couldn't stop talking about her. Headlines about her dress, her figure, and her life filled tabloids around the world. Shocking admission from Pippa Middleton, so remember the dress? I seem to remember this. This is the one she wore to her sister's wedding in 2011, the one that had people saying, wait a second, who are we supposed to really be looking at today? She didn't even say much, and she didn't need to, but people were fascinated by her. And that sudden fame came with pressure. Pippa wasn't an actress or a singer. She wasn't chasing celebrities. She was just living her life, and now, people wanted to know everything about her, including who she dated, what she wore, and where she went. At times, it was overwhelming. Still, she stayed calm. She smiled, she worked, and she tried to keep her private life private. Back then, she dated a banker named Nico Jackson. They were together for about 3 years. Many thought they would marry. They traveled, laughed, and looked good together. But something wasn't right. Their lives were moving in different directions, and after a while, they quietly ended things. That's when James Matthews entered the picture again. Yes, again, because James wasn't new. He and Pippa had known each other before. In fact, they had dated briefly years earlier. But timing is everything, and at that time, it hadn't worked out. He was a wealthy hedge fund manager from a respected family, quiet, reserved, and very focused. When they reconnected in 2015, they were both older and more grounded, and this time, it clicked. James was different from the men in Pippa's past. He wasn't looking for the spotlight. He didn't need attention. He had his own success, his own passions, and his own plans. He was steady. He liked the countryside. He liked privacy. And most of all, he seemed to really understand the pressure Pippa was under, because his younger brother had been in the public eye too. They began dating seriously. But unlike other couples, they didn't parade their love around. They kept things low-key. They went on holidays, had quiet dinners, and slowly blended their lives together. Some close friends said they balanced each other out. Her energy matched his calm. Her public side also softened his reserved one. In 2016, James proposed during a trip to the Lake District. It was romantic, private, and meaningful, just the way Pippa liked it. She didn't rush to announce it, but when the news came out, the media went wild again. Paparazzi followed her everywhere. People wanted to know about the ring, the dress, the guest list. And once again, Pippa smiled through it all. But behind the smiles, planning a high-profile wedding isn't easy. Every detail had to be perfect. Every moment protected. And yet, on May 20, 2017, Pippa walked down the aisle in a beautiful gown and married James in a traditional ceremony in her family's village church. Prince George and Princess Charlotte were part of the wedding party. Kate kept a low profile to avoid attention. It was elegant, peaceful, and full of love. For a while, everything looked like a dream. After their elegant wedding, Pippa and James moved into a luxurious townhouse in Chelsea, one of the most expensive and quiet areas in London. They seemed ready to build a life full of peace, privacy, and comfort. And in the early years of their marriage, that's exactly what they did. They traveled often, especially to the Alps where both of them enjoyed skiing. They shared a love for outdoor sports, long hikes, and weekend escapes. Whenever they needed a break from the noise of London, they would head to Glen Affric, the stunning estate owned by James's family in the Scottish Highlands. It was private, quiet, and surrounded by nature. That place became their retreat. During this time, Pippa kept a low profile. She worked on a few writing projects, contributing health and lifestyle columns for newspapers and magazines. She also published a book earlier on party planning. But as marriage settled in, her focus began to change. She was no longer just the glamorous sister of the future queen, she was building her own home, her own rhythm. And when she became a mother, everything changed. In October 2018, Pippa and James welcomed their first child, a baby boy named Arthur. He was born at the same hospital where Kate delivered all three of her children, the Lindo Wing at St. Mary's in London. Pippa later shared how much she enjoyed staying active during pregnancy and how becoming a mother added a new joy and purpose to her life. She was often seen taking Arthur on walks around the neighborhood, always dressed simply and sometimes even without a nanny by her side. It was clear she wanted to be present. And she didn't stop there. In March 2021, Pippa gave birth to their second child, a baby girl they named Grace. The family was growing, and so was their need for more space. That's when they quietly began spending more time outside London, especially in the Berkshire countryside, closer to where Pippa had grown up. She wanted her children to have the same quiet childhood she had once enjoyed, which was away from city traffic, cameras, and constant noise. Then in 2022, the couple welcomed their third child, another baby girl. Though they initially kept her name private from the public, it was later widely reported to be Rose Louise Victoria. By then, they were no longer living full-time in Chelsea. Instead, they had reportedly purchased a beautiful £15 million Georgian mansion in Berkshire. It had a large garden, open space, and was perfect for three small children to grow up in. And again, it placed them even closer to Pippa's parents, who could help with childcare and support. From the outside, it looked like everything was falling into place, a beautiful home, healthy children, supportive family nearby. And yet, something had changed. Because slowly, the picture-perfect moments started fading. James wasn't seen around as much. Pippa was spotted more often alone with the kids. There were fewer public events, fewer outings together, and whispers started to grow louder. People began to wonder, were they just adjusting to busy family life, or was something else going on? It's hard to say exactly when things changed, but the signs were there. Pippa started keeping a tighter circle. She stopped writing columns and made fewer public appearances. And the couple, once seen vacationing together, now seemed to travel separately, or not at all. The smiles were still there, but they felt different, more careful and even more polite than joyful. Stay tuned as we dive more into the signs that led to these divorce rumors, the moments that raised eyebrows. As Pippa and James' public relationship grew more distant, many started believing in the rumors about them. However, what made the rumors grow even louder was when they started showing up in public less often as a couple for important events. At first, no one thought much of it. They were busy people, after all. James had work responsibilities that kept him traveling, and Pippa had her hands full with the children and her own projects. But after a while, it started feeling different. It wasn't just about being busy anymore. It started to feel like they were choosing not to be seen together. One of the first times people truly noticed this was during Wimbledon in July 2023. It was one of the most anticipated events of the summer, not only because of the match, but because Catherine, the Princess of Wales, made her first public appearance since her cancer diagnosis. She sat in the royal box with Princess Charlotte beside her, and Pippa was seated right next to them. She looked polished and calm, wearing a smart outfit and offering a warm smile. But her husband was nowhere to be seen. James didn't arrive with her. He wasn't spotted nearby, and there was no mention of him in any of the coverage that followed. For a couple who had previously attended events together and always appeared to be in sync, his absence stood out. It might have gone unnoticed if it had only happened once, but soon more moments like this began to surface. Pippa started showing up at functions on her own. And while she looked composed and confident, it slowly became clear that James was no longer joining her in public life the way he once did. She was seen attending charity events, family celebrations, and even formal gatherings by herself. Photos of her taking the children to school or running errands started to show up in tabloids. And in those images, something about her demeanor had changed. She was still elegant, still smiling, but there was a quietness to her. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but people noticed that the lightness in her expression had softened. It wasn't that James and Pippa appeared unhappy when they were together, but more that their time together had become rare. In the past, their public interactions showed a couple who were easy around each other, occasionally exchanging knowing glances or leaning in slightly as they walked. That natural closeness seemed to fade from the spotlight. The rare times they were seen together, they didn't appear disconnected, but they also didn't seem as close. Over time, the sightings of them as a couple became so infrequent that the public began to wonder if something more serious was going on. Their vacations, which were once lavish family affairs often captured by photographers, stopped being shared. It had been years since the last family holiday photo surfaced of them together at Eden Rock in St. Bart's, which is the luxury resort owned by James's family. They used to visit with James' younger brother, Spencer Matthews, and his wife, Vogue Williams, but that also stopped. Friends close to the family noted that the two couples hadn't vacationed together since 2019. While no one ever publicly explained why, people who knew both sides mentioned that Pippa and Spencer Matthews' wife, Vogue, had never truly clicked. Vogue was bold, expressive, and always ready to post candid moments on social media. Pippa was more private, traditional, and reserved. Their personalities didn't clash in public, but they also didn't seem to have the bond many expected. One source even shared that if you were Pippa, you might find Vogue's energy overwhelming. That subtle difference may have created tension during family gatherings. And over time, those differences added up. According to insiders, the families began planning their trips separately, making sure they didn't overlap. They were polite with each other but not especially close. And that quiet distance created awkwardness. It wasn't confrontational, but it also wasn't easy. Stephanie W. Estrom, a professional marriage counselor, often speaks about how extended family dynamics can add pressure on couples, especially when small disagreements or personality differences are never addressed directly. Those moments tend to build over time and eventually shape how much a couple feels supported, even within their own family. Furthermore, as these tensions grew, the burden of keeping everything together seemed to fall on Pippa. She was managing 3 young children, public expectations, and the emotional weight of being the sister of the future queen. On top of all that, her husband was becoming less and less visible. He wasn't showing up at events and he wasn't being photographed alongside her. Eventually, people stopped asking where he was because his absence had become normal. Observers started pointing out the change in her demeanor. She still wore designer dresses and smiled when appropriate, but her joy seemed quieter. She no longer looked like someone attending events with her partner by her side, she looked like someone showing up out of duty. There was a stillness in her body language and sometimes even a hint of tiredness in her eyes, as if she was holding something in while making sure everything appeared normal from the outside. James, on the other hand, had nearly vanished from public view. He had always kept a relatively low profile, but now he was almost entirely absent. He wasn't mentioned in articles, he wasn't appearing in public, and he didn't seem involved in the same spaces he once occupied. His silence, both in the media and in appearances, was noticeable, and as months passed, it started to feel like a pattern rather than a coincidence. In today's world, social media often gives quiet hints about what's happening in people's relationships. People began noticing that Pippa and James stopped liking each other's posts, tagging one another, or sharing moments from their family life. They were never very active online to begin with, but the fact that even the smallest gestures stopped felt important. In a world where even private couples still interact online, their silence started to feel like a message of its own. Some of their friends also began to step back quietly or at least avoided saying too much. They stopped calling them a couple when speaking to the media and no longer expected to see both of them together at events or social gatherings. Now let's talk about their lifestyle differences. Pippa and James had very different schedules and daily routines. James often traveled for business, while Pippa was busy with charity work, writing, and looking after their children. This meant she was the one usually handling everything at home. She seemed to manage well, but trying to balance public commitments and private responsibilities isn't easy, especially when both people are constantly busy. There's also the pressure that comes from being connected to the royal family. Pippa isn't a royal herself, but she's the sister of the future Queen of England. That connection means people are always watching what she wears, who she's with, and how she acts. That kind of attention can be overwhelming when you're trying to take care of your family and keep your relationship strong. James also came from a wealthy and respected background. His father, David Matthews, owns the Eden Rock Hotel in St. Bart's, which is considered one of the most luxurious hotels in the world. Coming from a family like that brings its own kind of pressure because there's an expectation to appear successful and steady. So both of them were dealing with public attention and private challenges. Even though they stayed quiet about their personal situation, people started to notice things. When couples begin showing up separately and living more independently, it makes others wonder. And we can't forget they were raising children during all of this. Being a parent is already a full-time job, and doing it while being in the public eye and juggling your own career makes things even harder. Another thing people noticed was a change in their living situation. Even though they still had a home together, some reports said they were spending more time apart. James had work commitments that kept him traveling, while Pippa chose to stay closer to her family in the UK. And when couples begin to live in different places, even for practical reasons, it can create emotional distance. Of course, not every couple who lives apart is having problems. Sometimes it's just how their jobs or family life are set up. But in their case, the frequent solo outings, the changes in how they interacted, and the lack of recent photos together made people start asking questions. There were also reports from people close to them that something had changed in how they spoke to each other and how they acted in public. At one event, a photographer mentioned that they barely looked at one another. They stood next to each other but didn't show much warmth. These little things started to build a bigger picture. Still, neither of them has said anything about a divorce. So far, everything people are saying is based on what they've seen and heard. But it's also true that many public figures keep their personal matters quiet until they are ready. So something could be going on, but they just might not be ready to speak about it. Some fans still hope they are just going through a quiet patch and are working things out privately. Others believe they might already be separated and are simply choosing to deal with it respectfully and quietly. But here's the most astonishing part: Pippa Middleton's growing strength. Despite the rumors, despite the whispers surrounding her marriage and the growing distance between her and James, Pippa Middleton has quietly shown what resilience looks like. She hasn't made headlines for speaking out or drawing attention to herself, but rather for staying steady, focused, and deeply committed to the things that matter most. While the world speculated, she kept showing up, for her children, for her work, and for the causes she believes in. Pippa has always valued privacy, but that hasn't stopped her from contributing meaningfully in areas that align with her values. Over the years, she supported several charities, and even while going through changes in her personal life, she hasn't stepped away from that work. In fact, many would say she has leaned into it more. She has been a dedicated ambassador for the British Heart Foundation, a cause close to her heart. Her work with them wasn't just about lending her name. She participated in fundraising events and even athletic challenges to raise awareness. She ran marathons, cycled across countries, and took part in demanding sporting events to raise both funds and visibility for heart disease prevention. These weren't quiet photo ops, they were real efforts that showed her drive and personal discipline. She also supported Mary Hare School for Deaf Children, a cause that doesn't often make headlines but matters deeply to those it serves. Her involvement there was genuine, and she made visits to the school and helped raise awareness for its programs. Even though she wasn't the face of national campaigns, her presence brought attention and care to communities that often go unseen. In recent years, while she stepped back from the large public events, she focused more on her role as a mother and a woman building a meaningful life outside of the royal lens. After welcoming her third child in 2022, Pippa shifted her attention toward creating stability at home. But she also began exploring her own interests in wellness and health. And in 2024, that quiet work began to take shape in a more public way. Pippa Middleton launched a wellness-focused business venture blending her interest in family fitness and nutrition. The brand, which has yet to become a household name, reflects the lifestyle she lives, rooted in balance, simple routines, and natural wellness. She didn't position it as a celebrity line or a trend-driven company. Instead, it was designed around real families and realistic health goals based on the way she manages her own life. Her approach was modest but sincere. She wasn't aiming to become an influencer or a media figure. She simply saw a space where she could contribute what she'd learned as a mother, an athlete, and someone who understands the pressures of maintaining well-being in a demanding world. The business started slowly through partnerships, content, and health-related events, and it's continuing to grow on her own terms. Alongside this, she's been quietly involved in education-focused charities, helping fund literacy programs and supporting causes that provide early childhood development resources. These efforts aren't front-page news, but they matter to her, and that consistency is what people closest to her admire most. So do you think Pippa's quiet strength is a sign she's preparing for something bigger behind the scenes, or is she simply choosing peace over publicity? Drop it in the comments section below. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more. Also, click the next video shown on your screen, you will enjoy it.